This morning we looked at the ideas of how grasping leads to existence or continued existence. And we had a little bit of a look at how craving then leads to grasping. And now we're going to look at feelings and how feeling then leads to craving and how this leads to grasping in turn. So again, the idea of craving here, because we crave for things in the world, we grasp things to enable us to satisfy our cravings. And the way that craving is described here, it is described in terms of the 6 kinds of craving, and craving for the 6 senses and the 5 ordinary senses and the kind of special Buddhist sense of the mind, the 6 senses of Buddhism. But there's another way of thinking about craving, and then we can think about craving as it is described in the second noble truth. Yeah, the craving for sensory pleasures, the craving for existence, and the craving for annihilation. That's kind of a nice way of thinking about craving, because it gives it a bit more kind of content. If you just say craving for the 6 senses, it's a bit unclear. Okay, we know, of course, what it refers to. But when you think about sensory craving and craving for existence, it really boils down to that. It gives you an idea of the essential aspects of craving. Yeah, it's the sensory world around us that we're always immersed in. And the second aspect is this feeling of existence, the feeling that we are somebody in this world with a certain identity, all of these things. These are the 2 main aspects in Buddhism that need to be overcome to enable us to achieve awakening and all of the profound insights that the Buddhist path says it is available to us. It's quite simple, really. Yeah, it boils down to 2 kinds of craving: craving for sensory objects of the world, and the craving that relates to the sense of I am, of existence. These are really the 2 main things. And if you can overcome those 2 things fully, basically that is the meaning of awakening itself. And of course, that is kind of interesting, because it means that there are a number of cravings that are not part of that. Yeah? What about craving to be kind? What about craving to meditate? What about craving to be a Buddhist? Or craving to practice the spiritual life? Yeah? What about these things? So they are presumably all right. And of course, the point is that we don't craving things. The definition of craving, the Pali word is tanha. And tanha really means thirst. And of course, thirst is a particularly powerful desire. Yeah? You thirst for something. It means that it is a metaphor for strong desire. And so we don't normally crave quite in that way for these kind of things. It's more like, yes, you desire it, you want to be kind, you want to live well, but it's not really that kind of craving. Yeah? And for that reason, arguably, it is not part of craving, but it's still a positive desire. And this is one of those paradoxes in Buddhism, and this is a paradox that is actually spoken about in the suttas, that if you crave or desire in the right way, it leads to the overcoming of desire. If you attach in the right way, it leads to the overcoming of attachment. This kind of seems paradoxical, but on the other hand, it also seems eminently reasonable. Because if you're going to be motivated to do anything, any action in this world requires some kind of desire to drive you, some kind of motivating force. That also makes sense. So some degree of desire to motivate us is useful. So please desire to be kind, desire to be compassionate, desire to be a peaceful person in the world, desire to be someone who makes the world a better place, rather than someone who tears things down, which is so common in this life. And then you become a blessing for yourself and for the world around you. What a wonderful thing that is. So, and of course, then we can see also when you think about craving in that way, in terms of craving for the sensory things of the world and the craving for existence, it kind of fits in quite nicely with the 4 kinds of grasping we're talking about. Yeah, the grasping to the sensory things, one type of grasping that kind of fits directly with the craving for sensory things. The grasping of views or doctrines of a self that has very closely related to the craving to exist. And And the last one, the grasping of precepts and observances, I think it is mostly related to the idea of existence. We want to exist in a good way. We want to improve our existence. We want to do something with ourselves. And so we grasp onto precepts and observances, things that we do in life to kind of enhance our well-being, etc., in a very general sense. And probably more related to the sense of I am. It's not really sensory in that that's already covered by the other things there. That's a nice way of thinking about the connection there. What then about craving? Why does craving come about? And I think it's fairly obvious why craving comes about, but it's very nicely stated here. Let me just read it out. I can't remember if I read it yesterday, but we didn't. So let's just read it out. Feeling is the condition for craving. That's what I said. And this is a way to understand how this is so. Suppose there were totally and utterly no feelings for anything. I'm not sure why it has for anyone. I think it's kind of this is the point of it. It really means for anything at all in the whole world. And so really, I would prefer for anything throughout this particular sutta rather than anyone. For anything, anywhere. That is feeling born of contact through the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The six senses. Any feeling coming through the six senses. When there is no feeling at all, with the cessation of feeling, would craving still be found? No, sir. That is why this is the cause, the source, the origin, the condition of craving, namely feeling. So again, the idea of feeling in Buddhism is basically the quality of the experience. And the quality of experience can be understood as threefold. It's either positive or negative or neutral. And if it is positive, if it is attractive to you, if it's pleasant, usually called pleasant, then you will desire it, you will want more of that. That's kind of the definition of pleasant, it means want more of it. If it is unpleasant, you want to reject it. So the craving here really is twofold. It's a craving to get something and craving to reject things. Both kinds of craving are included in the aspect of craving here. You reject things and you want to get hold of things. You want to kind of acquire things in life. Two kinds of craving here. But then there is a neutral feeling. A neutral feeling is kind of a funny one. A neutral feeling is something we don't normally understand in our ordinary life. Something that just seems boring. It seems like you just want to yawn and go to bed. It's kind of a neutral feeling. It's not really interesting. It doesn't really motivate us to do very much. But in the higher aspects of the Dhamma, where you go really profoundly into samadhi, actually neutral feeling turns out to be the highest kind of pleasure. Kind of weird to talk about neutrality as pleasure, right? But this is essentially what the Buddha says. Highest kind of pleasure is neutral feeling, where the mind is utterly even. There's no kind of attraction in the ordinary sense. That neutral feeling becomes then the highest kind of thing. Whereas in ordinary life, we don't really appreciate it very much. We are attracted, we are repelled. Aversion, desire and aversion is kind of the usual status of our existence. When I use the word aversion here, I don't mean ill will. It is very common these days to use the word aversion to mean ill will, but that's actually not really the meaning of the word. If you look it up in the dictionary, which is sometimes you have to see the meaning of these words, aversion just means like a rejection of something. You don't want to see it. You have a negative feeling or experience for something. Like you have an aversion to a cesspit, or a kind of a something very unpleasant, a nuclear waste dump or something like that. Or don't want to go there. Okay, aversion doesn't mean you have ill will. Ill will can come from that, but it's not really the same thing. So these are the three kinds of feelings, and you can see how that leads to craving. And feeling is a very important aspect on the Buddhist path. And I can't remember whether I talked about this already, but one of the ways that a personality or any kind of being is analyzed by the Buddha. It's analyzed into what is called the 5 khandhas. And 5 khandhas are like 5 aspects of personality. Yeah, a very important analysis in Buddhism. And the reason why it is so important is because it is in the 5 khandhas that normally you find people seeing a self. This is where we grasp onto the idea of the self within those 5 khandhas. Now, one of those 5 khandhas is precisely feeling. It's Vedana. It's one of these 5 khandhas. And in many ways, Vedana can be said to be maybe a critical one of these 5 khandhas. It's critical because Vedana is something that is easy to relate to. Yeah, we know pleasant and unpleasant. But also, it is critical because Vedana is the thing that gives life meaning. Yeah, Vedana is what actually motivates us to do anything at all. If there was no Vedana, if there was no feeling, if things weren't either pleasant or unpleasant, you wouldn't be doing anything. You'd be sitting on your bottom, just staring into empty space and have no motivation at all. And sometimes that's really nice to stare into empty space, but you can't do that all the time, right? But at least not unless you kind of make an end of everything. That's what you would do, because motivation comes from feelings. Right now, you look into this room, and I must say, this is a really well-chosen meditation room. I don't know how you found such a marvelous place. This was Danny. Are you the one? Where's Danny? Danny, not here. Okay.
He's on Zoom.
He's on Zoom, is he? Okay. So hello, Danny. So you have chosen a really wonderful meditation room. I must say, it's really pleasant to be here. When I look at it, I think, wow, pleasure. But I think when I see this room, yeah, really tall, super duper tall ceiling. Nice kind of rustic brickwork and things around us, nice kind of large wooden beams in here. It's a beautiful space, a marvelous place to kind of sit down and meditate, I reckon, anyway. So maybe you don't agree with me, but that's what I think. Yeah. So there's a degree of pleasure, yeah, in anything we do. So you're motivated to come here in the morning and think, yeah, this is a nice place to sit and be peaceful because it has a peaceful ambience just being here. And then you come here and you sit down and you're motivated to come here. But if you looked at this room and it didn't involve any kind of feeling, whatever, yeah, okay, you saw bricks, okay, it's just, bricks, no feeling of any kind, there's kind of completely nothing, then it wouldn't motivate you to do anything. If you went down and saw the beautiful food that made by Danny every day, and hello, Danny. Just praising your food a little bit. So, yeah, you go down and you see the food, and it doesn't evoke anything in you. Kind of neither disgust nor like. It's kind of just food. Yeah, you're not hungry. You're not going to eat it because it doesn't have any attraction to you at all, right? It's just going to be stuff for you. Right? So everything we do in life is motivated by this distinction between pleasure and displeasure. This is what drives our existence. You wake up in the morning, you get out of bed because you're expecting some sort of result of getting out of bed. Yeah? There's something positive about that. There's some positive, you evoke some positive feeling, the idea of getting out of bed, hopefully. Or at least you know that the negative consequences are so bad. If you don't get out, that's kind of a positive feeling. So you've got to get out. Yeah? But like when you're a child, get up, but get up, or you're gonna whatever happened. I don't know how children are treated these days, but anyway, whatever. So it is the driving force in life. So if you have a full insight into feeling, and you understand that feelings are non-self, that they are out of control, that they are impermanent, you can't really control them. That is why that is sufficient for awakening. Because if feelings are out of control, if feelings, the pleasure and displeasure of life is something that, is in the end, you just have to give up on achieving those things you want to achieve, and everything loses meaning. There is no meaning without those things. Perception doesn't give you meaning without feelings. And this is why you find in the suttas that very often when you see people achieving awakening, very often it is done purely on the basis of contemplating feeling. Yeah? You understand feeling fully, and by fully understanding feeling, you understand that this life, this kind of existence doesn't make any sense. So you abandon everything. Yeah? That's how awakening happens. So for this reason, feeling is very kind of very powerful. If you look at the other ideas, okay, the body form, is kind of a much lesser thing. I mean, it's very useful to have insight into the body. For goodness sake, it's extremely useful, especially in meditation itself, because it kind of guides you towards deeper meditation. So very useful in that sense. But it's also kind of limiting. It's just the perception. Our perceptions, which is the third of the 5 khandhas, perception just means the ability to make sense of the world around us. Everything we see because of perception. We see people, we see tripods with cameras on them, that's what I see anyway. We see floors, we see ceilings, we see bricks, we see, all of these things around us, meditation mats, Buddha statues, an unusual Buddha statue that apparently came from the garden center, according to Venerable Vimala. So it's kind of very, very interesting. Why not? Keep it simple. And the beautiful flowers on there as well. So this is how we make sense of the world. This is how we distinguish between Buddhism and Christianity, or atheism, or agnosticism, between friends and enemies. All of this is in the realm of perception. So perception is this very vast of these 5 khandhas. It includes a lot of things, but it doesn't really have any meaning in its own right, except when it is conjoined with feelings. So feeling is more important. Consciousness is kind of separate, very hard to get a handle on consciousness, except if it relates to feeling somehow. Consciousness is then the 5th of the 5 khandhas. The 4th of the 5 khandhas is the will, sankhara, volition, the will, intention, our agency in the world. So obviously a very important thing. But again, it is also related to feeling somehow, and it doesn't really take you all the way to the end of the path in the way feeling does. So feeling kind of stands out as something very significant. You will see this in the suttas. So it is really worthwhile contemplating it. But it is worthwhile contemplating not only because it can take you all the way to the end of the path. I mean, that's pretty cool already, but it's also a bit distant for many of us. I don't know if any of you are kind of ready for the final awakening yet, but if you are, then wonderful. But if you're not, I'm going to give a teaching for those of you not at the very end of the path as well, because it kind of comes in handy there. So, what is that? And that is the very fact that feelings are the source of craving. And craving is a problem because craving makes the mind restless and agitated and averse and often leads to anger, all of these kind of things. So because craving is a problem and it comes from feeling, it is actually very important to be mindful of that arising of craving based on feelings. So this kind of link between feeling and craving, or feeling and aversion, is actually a very important link in this dependent origination. A lot of the things that we do on the path, a lot of the things that we do to what is called the sense restraint, indriya samvara sila is a Pali word, the habit of restraining the senses, quite literally, that happens here in that linkage between these things. And that's why I'm going to talk about this at quite a bit of length later on. So this is where a lot of the kind of the daily contemplations and daily dealing with things in the world happens in this place. So overcoming of anger, overcoming of excessive desires and attachments happens in this particular area. So very fascinating and very important to understand how this actually works. And one of the points that I will make is that even though we translate this as sense restraint, and restraint sounds like willpower, Restraint usually means willpower in the English language. That's how I understand it. Anyway, you restrain someone means you hold them back. You restrain a child running into the street because a big truck is coming. That means hold back, willpower. But actually, on the Buddhist path, normally it refers to wisdom. And wisdom is so much more beautiful than the will, isn't it? Wisdom has this beautiful ring about it. Who doesn't want to be wiser? Is anyone here who doesn't want to be wiser? You may have come to the wrong place if you don't want to be wise. It's kind of wise is such a, everyone who has any sense at all would want to be wise. And it's for lack of wisdom that don't want to be wise in the first place. So of course you want to be wise, because wisdom allows you to live well. It allows you to understand how things work. It allows you to be more happy. It allows you to overcome problems in life. It allows you to deal with people and situations. It allows for anything that is good is allowed for through wisdom. So wisdom, of course, it is attractive. In fact, it is the most attractive of any kind of spiritual quality. At least that's how it seems to me. And I'm sure most people would agree with that. It is the pinnacle of the Buddhist path, the pinnacle of the 5 faculties, for example, the panch indriya. The last one is known as the padi indriya, the faculty of wisdom. So it's all there, very, very important. So we want to use the power of wisdom to overcome these problems rather than the willpower, which is so tiring to use willpower all the time, right? But so exhausting. How nice it is to be able to sit down, let go of everything, and just enjoy without doing things all the time. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, it is so nice. You understand the torture of doing, the torture of all the activity inside. Yeah, enough torture. Get that torture out of the way. The mara of doing it in life. So this is what we kind of want to deal with here. There is an important point here. Often it is said that it is in the link between feeling and craving that you break dependent origination. This is kind of a common thing that kind of goes around the Buddhist world, kind of these sayings spread around, and everyone says, yeah, well, that's really cool, and everyone believes about what you're thinking about it. But is that really true? Do you actually break the chain between feeling and craving? It is certainly true that we do a lot of work here, so to speak, and do a lot of spiritual practice at this point, because we need to reduce craving. But does it actually break through what we do here? And the answer is that, well, to break or to end dependent origination, to make it stop, to make it cease, so we don't produce suffering in the future, what you really have to do is to go back to the very beginning of dependent origination, which is ignorance. We haven't even seen ignorance here because I only looked at the 9 steps, not the 12. But ignorance, we'll look at it later on, is at the very root. That is what we have to overcome. And that is why the Noble Eightfold Path is geared towards insight, to understanding, because it overcomes ignorance. When you overcome ignorance or delusion, that is when craving stops. It's important to understand you cannot break the cycle merely by contemplating, feeling, and craving, somehow restraining things. That is not enough. It is the insight at the root of dependent origination that is required. And if you get that right, then yes, then what happens as a consequence of that is that you break the link between feeling and craving. It is broken indirectly through the fact that you overcome ignorance. But it's not done merely by restraining yourself or looking at that link. Yeah. So the consequence is that the automatic process stops, but it stops by overcoming ignorance, by acquiring wisdom. This is, I think, an important point to realize, because sometimes you get this kind of sayings and this kind of nice little catchphrases that everyone kind of grasps onto, and sometimes they become like a truth without actually being true. You sort of believe this is true, and then it kind of actually turns out to be wrong. Yeah. That kind of can be a bit problematic. Yeah. So this is then the important linkage between feeling and craving. Yeah. Before I say anything more, I can see a little bit of craving for water myself. So I always assume that other people are craving for water as well, so I feel all the way around. Okay. All right, so what I will do now, I'm going to move on to the next sutta. I'm going to take a break from dependent origination. I'm not sure if maybe you're happy about that, getting a break from this seemingly maybe it seems complicated. Actually, once you get used to thinking about it, it's not all that complicated, actually. It's just that there's lots of new things for some of you, which makes it maybe hard to follow. But you get used to this idea fairly quickly, I can assure you. So what I want to do now, I want to discuss in a bit more detail precisely this linkage between feeling and craving, how to deal with that, what it means to be wise about these things. Yeah? And to start off, I'm going to start with one of the little suttas that I remember when I came across the sutta, I thought, wow, this is just so amazing. Yeah? And it is so amazing because it fitted in with so many other things that I already had kind of been told by teachers and things, and I thought, wow, this is exactly what I've been told all the time. It's really, really cool that these things kind of come together in this way. This sutta is called the Two Powers. It's from the Ajahn numerical discourses, the A-N there, that's the reference to the sutta. A-N means Ajahn, translated into English as numerical discourses. The 2 means the second chapter. Dot 12 is the 12th sutta in the second chapter. That's how to read these things. And the name of the sutta is Two Powers. So we're dealing with powers. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting because when we're dealing with powers, it means that this is something obviously very useful for our practice. It empowers our practice, you can argue. If you have access to these powers, it will empower your practice almost by definition. So the Buddha says, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas. One of the important points when we read the suttas, bhikkhus, this must be Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, because if this were Bhattacharya, it would say mendicants, not bhikkhus. Mendicants basically is basically a translation of bhikkhus. Bhikkhus means a male alms person, someone who lives on alms, lives on other people's donations. Bhikkhuni is a female who lives on other people's alms or donations. So that is kind of the meaning behind these things. So mendicant is actually a very correct word, but it's also a bit archaic. No one says mendicant these days. Yeah? Don't go into the street, or even in England, where they kind of use the most archaic and complex English in the English world, they still don't use words like mendicant. Oh, I say a mendicant coming down the street. You wouldn't hear that even in those kind of circles. So for that, it can be, that's kind of the downside, but the actual meaning of the word is very, very precise. And one of the interesting things about this, and one of the reasons why Bhattacharya uses the word mendicant, is to make it gender neutral. Yeah? A mendicant takes away the gender in things, and that's actually very, very nice, because then everyone is included with the gender neutrality. Yeah? And it is actually also more correct, because the strange thing about the way the Pali language works, and presumably all Indian languages, there are some Indian scholars that know more about this than I do, but maybe they can tell me off if I get this wrong. But the way that Pali works is that when you address a crowd or you address more than one person, the address is always to the most senior person present. Yeah, so when the Buddha says bhikkhus, it doesn't just mean monks, it means everyone who is there, but the address is to the monks. We see this in the sutta, as you see, for example, the Buddha is visiting the 3 monks, Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila. These were kind of 3 friends, 3 mates, we say in Australia. So 3 mates hanging out together. And when he speaks to these 3 monks, he doesn't say Anuruddha, Kimbila, and Nandiya. He doesn't say you guys, as it would say in the United States. He says instead, he says Anuruddhas, the plural of Anuruddha. That's what it says. But this is how the Pali language works. And so when you say bhikkhus, it refers to everyone who is there. So for that reason, the bhikkhunis would then be the second group, who were very important in this case. So mendicants then is appropriate. But even the lay people will also be present. It was very common at that time in ancient India to come to the monasteries on the Posaka days, especially on the full moon and the new moon, and also the half moon days sometimes, but usually the full moon and the new moon. They would come and they would hear discourses, yeah? And then the Buddha would say, bhikkhus. And they would say, well, hey, what about us? Actually, they wouldn't say that because they would know that they would be included, right? So these are the upasakas. Upasaka means a male lay follower. Buddhism, upasika is a female lay follower. Yeah? So everyone would be included in this way. Yeah? That is an important point, because you may feel that when you read the suttas, you may get the feeling that you are excluded. Yeah, I'm not a bhikkhu, so it's nothing to do with me, right? Actually, no, it has to do with you. You can't escape that easily. Yeah? Yeah, you've got to do this practice regardless of who you are. So this is kind of the challenge here, yeah, for every one of us. There's no getting out of this. This is what you have to do. And if you keep on listening to these suttas, eventually you will be doing it. Why? Because you get brainwashed. That's why. Brainwashing is good. This is one of the things I remember coming to Bodhidharma Monastery. And Ajahn Brahmali would say, yeah, have you come here to be brainwashed? Or something to that effect. Ajahn Shah used to say, have you come here to die? Is what he would say to the monastery, right? What are you talking about, come to die? Ajahn Brahmali would say, have you come here to be brainwashed? It's a similar kind of thing, yeah? If you're brainwashed, you're basically dead. It's kind of simple kind of idea. So, and initially I thought, what are you talking about? I'm certainly not going to be brainwashed. Yeah, I'm independent. I'm my own master. I know what I want in this world. I came here on my own free will. Yeah, free will. Wait a minute, free will. Is there such a thing as free will anyway? That's another topic which we cannot debate right now, but it's a very interesting topic, understanding the idea of free will in a Buddhist way. But the idea, of course, is that we are brainwashed regardless, because brainwashing just means conditioning. And if you're not brainwashed by the Buddha, you can be brainwashed by all the crazy things in the world, by the advertisements, by other people with crazy ideas. Yeah? So regardless of what we do, we are going to be brainwashed. And this is just the nature of conditioning. Yeah? So brainwashing is going to happen anyway. So choose good brainwashing. Yeah? This is why you're here, because you've already been brainwashed a little bit in the right way. So now you're choosing more good brainwashing. Yeah? Choose the Buddha's kind of brand of brainwashing, or washing brand, whatever it is, the Buddha brand. And then you're on the right track. But brainwashing is not an option. Brainwashing is part of what life is all about. This is kind of what is so fascinating about this. I lost my track now where I was going with this. But anyway, this is the problem. We're kind of going too far afield. You lose the sense of it. But we know where we are because we have the sutta here, so it doesn't matter. So you come. So this is kind of what this. So this is all these people, the various groups, the 4 parisas, as they call in the suttas, 4 assemblies, not called the fourfold sangha, by the way. This is kind of a modern idea that the sangha is kind of anyone who is practicing together in the suttas. Sangha is always the monastic sangha. The lay people are called, the lay people and the monastics are called parisas, as a group of 4. It means 4 assemblies, the 4 gatherings, if you like. So anyway, so everyone is quite possibly present here now. Yeah, and then the Buddha says, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, anyone really. There are these 2 powers. What 2? The power of reflection and the power of development. Let's just stop there, because this is already quite interesting. Yeah, because very often the idea of reflection, the power of what is paṭicca-samuppāda, paṭicca-samuppāda, the power of reflection, is often underestimated on the Buddhist path. Yeah, we don't often talk about reflecting in the right way. We talk maybe about wisdom, not about reflecting. In other words, reflecting means to think over something, it means contemplating something, it means taking up a theme and then seeing what is going on. It means like reading a sutta and then thinking, what does this actually mean? How does this relate to my life? How does this, in a kind of very immediate sense? Yes, this is what reflection means, making it real in a way. Very often the suttas end up just being a theoretical thing that is kind of at arm's length. But you want to make it real. How does this? The Buddha is talking to us, right? He's our teacher. So what is it trying to say? Your life is certainly to be understood in terms of these suttas, in terms of the similes, in terms of everything there. So how does it relate to me? I'm just trying to understand that. That is where it becomes real. But this requires reflection. It requires a gradual kind of movement towards that view of the Buddha to understand things in the right way. And when you read the suttas, you will see this is a very common theme in the suttas. You listen to a teaching, and you reflect on it, you scrutinize it, and then gradually you come to an acceptance of that view that the Buddha is putting forth. Your mind is turning around, moving in that direction, because you see that there's something profound, beautiful, useful, beneficial, advantageous that leads to happiness and away from suffering that is available to you. Why would you not do these things? Why would you not move in that direction? But you need to reflect to understand it. So reflection is actually extraordinarily important. In fact, it's so important that here it is called the power of the mind. The other power is the power of development. This is called bhavana in Pali. And the bhavana is usually the synonym for chitta bhavana. Chitta bhavana means the development of the mind. And that basically means meditation practice. So you have two powers, reflection and meditation. These are the two powers that I talked about here. So how are these powers used? How do they go together? This is what is so interesting about this particular sutta. The Buddha says, what is the power of reflection? Here, someone reflects thus. Bodily misconduct has a bad result in the present life and in the future life. Verbal misconduct has a bad result in the present life and in the future life. Mental misconduct has a bad result in the present life and in the future life. Having reflected thus, you abandon bodily misconduct and develop good bodily conduct. You abandon verbal misconduct and develop good verbal conduct. You abandon mental misconduct and develop good mental conduct. You maintain yourself in purity. This is called the power of reflection. So the power of reflection, in other words, has to do with our ability to live well, the ability to live with kindness, the ability to give up all the negative things. Here it says specifically, you give up the bad things and you develop the good things. This is a very important principle of the Buddhist path. It was very interesting. I was talking to someone this afternoon in the interviews, and they told me that, I never really thought about it, that sila actually implies kindness. And this is such a common misunderstanding about the idea of sila. It is not just keeping the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts or the 10 precepts or the 227 precepts or the 311 precepts. As the bhikkhunis, so they kind of get the most precepts of all. Maybe that means they are the most pure. Maybe I'm not sure. But anyway, lots of precepts, but that's not enough. That just avoids doing the bad things. We need to actually go out of our way to do good things. Take every opportunity to be kind, every opportunity to say a kind word, to do a little action of kindness, to do an act of generosity. Whatever it is, tiny little things. Just think a tiny kind thought. Every opportunity. When you start to see the importance of this and how it actually builds up everything else, you would never lose the opportunity to do even the tiniest act of kindness. Grab it when you see it. Don't be afraid of making a fool of yourself. Sometimes I say good morning to strangers. I did this the other day, walking down the street here, and the local Belgians here are very friendly people. They would say bonjour to me, I would say bonjour back. Because that's about the extent of my French. Actually, I know a little bit more French, but not much more. And it's really nice. They probably thought I was really weird, but they still said bonjour to me. Isn't that kind of nice? And sometimes you say bonjour to somebody and they look at you as if you're crazy. Okay, that's fine. Okay, you go. That's all right. But then it's because, especially in cities, people are not used to you saying good morning or whatever. I think you're nice to do that. But it's kind of nice. You do something. Sometimes you have a really nice response when you do that. It opens something up for people. There's a friendly face early in the morning. Of course, you have to say it in the right way, yeah, with friendliness, not as a kind of, the wrong way, of course. So there's little things that we can do in the world which kind of makes the world a slightly brighter place. And it's important not to be afraid. It's important to take the risks in life, because a life without risks is a life not really properly lived at the moment. Risk is a part of existence. So the importance of this, yeah. And of course, very interesting here is that mental misconduct is overcome by the power of reflection. I think one of the main wrong turns that we often make in Buddhism is that we think that purifying the mind happens only through meditation practice. But actually, no, that is not really how the suttas work at all. Purification of the mind happens long before you get to the meditation practice. Meditation practice is really the final kind of purification, where the mind is already very steady, mindful, and clear. Then you abandon the 5 hindrances, which are these upakilesas, these tiny defilements of the mind. Everything prior to that is abandoned in this way, through reflection. This is extremely interesting, because it is not how we often are taught. Buddhism, at least not in my experience. Maybe some people teach it in this way, but it's not that common. And when you think about the path, one of my favorite teachings is the gradual training that you find in the suttas. I teach this usually on most of my retreats. And the gradual training is the gradual purification of the mind, starting off from the time you hear the word of the Buddha until you reach final awakening. It goes stage by stage all the way, right? And when you look at those stages, you realize that purifying yourself happens gradually, and it happens through a lot of reflection and restraint, until eventually you're ready for meditation practice. But a large part of that, sense restraint, sati-sampajanya, ordinary morality, contentment, all of those aspects that are found in that gradual training are reflections mostly to be done, thinking about the world in the right way. Yeah, so very, very important to use reflection to get us to the point where meditation really becomes possible. If you sit down, try to meditate with too much desire and too much aversion, the mind is not really clear, you end up wasting a lot of time. It doesn't really work out, all over the place. If you find yourself thinking too much, that is usually the reason why you're thinking too much. So very important. Reflection overcomes the problems in the mind. I will prove this to you later on by more suttas that talk about exactly the same thing. So the Buddha says here, you reflect like this, bodily misconduct has a bad result in the present life and the future life. It doesn't mean that you think that precise sentence, but this is like a topic of investigation. You think about that, you understand why that is the case. So if the Buddha says bodily misconduct has a bad result in the present life, well, why is that the case? What is he talking about here? And then you start reflecting on this, and you start to understand, actually, if I act badly in my body, other people are going to be hurt, right? It's obvious. If I'm going to have compassion towards others, if I want to give a gift to others through my actions, through the way I speak, I can't have bad bodily conduct. I want to be kind to others. I want other people to be happy in the world. I want to have mudita. I want to have a sense of sympathetic joy for other people's happiness. No way I want to hurt other people or any beings for that matter. And for myself, if I do bad things, I'm going to regret it later on. I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to cast this shadow over my mind. When I try to meditate, my mind will not be bright and pure and beautiful and clear. Instead, it will have this shadow over it, this kind of darkness that will stop you from achieving meditation properly. Investigate that, see this, and the more clearly this becomes, the more powerful will be your ability to practice good conduct in ordinary life. It's like you're programming your mindfulness to remind you at all times what you need to be doing, what is important, what really matters in your life. This is interesting, isn't it? I don't know, I get really excited when I read this. I find it so interesting, and it's so I don't know, and these are things that we can do, right? Everyone has the ability to reflect. Everyone has the ability to think. We just need to align our thinking with the way the Buddha explains how reflection should be done. So that's the present life, yeah? And of course, future life, this is enhanced even more, because it's almost like a multiplier effect when you get reborn, because then you get reborn in a different realm. So whatever suffering you have in this life is small compared to the suffering you might have in the future if you get reborn like as a bison, for example. Imagine getting reborn as a bison. You have to walk and take it on a plane from the US, put down in Belgium somewhere. Bisons, I don't know, do bisons like to be in Belgium? I can't imagine. Bisons like to be on the prairies in the US. That's where they belong. They don't belong in Belgium, for goodness sake. but you have no choice, right? If you are in bison, that's what happens to you. You just get stuck in this plane and get taken to Belgium, and you have to graze in the fields out here. It's a pretty miserable life, actually. Yeah. And sometimes we think that animals are very cute. Yeah, I mean, I live in the middle of kangaroos in Australia. At a distance, when you see them on TV, they look very cute. But when you live among them, you know that life as a kangaroo is not all that wonderful or great. It's pretty harsh, actually. A lot of fighting between them. Very often I have some food left in my bowl and I will give it to the kangaroos. And if there's two kangaroos around, they will fight over that food. Mother and child will fight with each other over the food. Yeah, it's kind of extraordinary to see that. This is the animal realm. It's a very, very harsh place. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked now. My point is just that, whenever you experience you have in this life, the future life takes to amplify those experiences, both on the good side and the bad side. And this is why I'm taking quite a bit of time explaining the process of rebirth, how you establish your consciousness, and that carries on into the future in that way. This is how kind of the process happens. And then based on that reflection, it sounds very easy the way it says here. You have to reflect like this. You abandon the bodily misconduct and develop good bodily mind. It sounds kind of very straightforward. But of course, it takes quite a bit of reflection. It takes quite a bit of perseverance to be able to build up these ideas within you. And this is what I want to help you to do with reading out the next few suttas. They're all going to be about how to reflect, to give you some guidance. It doesn't mean that we should take those ideas literally and reflect exactly like that, but it gives you a hint on how to apply your mind in a way so that you overcome these negative qualities of the mind. So this is the power of reflection. And then when the mind reaches a degree of purity through this power of reflection, when the mind is no longer kind of being buffeted around by ill will, aversion, and desires, it is fairly mindful, fairly peaceful in the present. That is when sati-patthāna practice, that is when mindfulness of breathing, that is when meditation becomes possible. Before that, you can still meditate, and it's a wonderful thing to use meditation just to relax. I would really recommend that, just to kind of drop things a little bit. But the real meditation of the Buddha is actually quite a profound thing. And when the Buddha talks about meditation, he doesn't kind of, it's quite profound. Yeah? It takes a degree of clarity even to get started. So once that is established, and you maintain yourself in purity, having used the power of reflection in this way, then comes the usage of the power of development. And it says here, what is the power of development? Here, a bhikkhu, a bhikkhuni, and a paṭicca-samuppāda, and anyone else who wants to develop these things, develops the awakening factor of mindfulness that is based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. You develop the awakening factor of investigation of qualities. I'm changing the translation a little because I think having different translations can be useful. Awakening factor of investigation into qualities. The awakening factor of energy, you develop that. You develop the awakening factor of rapture or joy. You develop the awakening factor of tranquility, passaddhi. You develop the awakening factor of stillness, samadhi. You develop the awakening factor of equanimity, or if you like, evenness of mind, that is based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. This is called the power of development. So the power of development is defined in different ways. There's 3 or 4 suttas, one after the other, that talks about the same issues. Yeah? In one place, the 4 jhanas I mentioned here, it is the 7 factors of awakening. This is the sutta-retreat in Pali that you see here. And of course, this is all about samadhi practice. Yeah? This is all about meditation practice. It begins with the awakening factor of mindfulness. So it begins with satipatthana, it begins with anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, and then it goes on from there. Yeah? So we use with power or reflection to bring the mind to mindfulness and clarity. Then you use the power of development and taking the mind all the way to stillness through this beautiful sequence, the 7 factors of awakening. And this sequence that we see here of the 7 factors of awakening is very, very similar to what we will look at later on, which is dependent liberation. It's almost the same sequence. It is actually just a variation on a theme, really. The theme is basically the same, but they have different variations. So this is one of the things the Buddha is a master of, these variations on the theme. Things that are roughly the same, but with slightly different viewpoints, slightly different angle to kind of improve your understanding of what is going on there. So you have the 7 factors of awakening, you have the dependent liberation, you have the 6 recollections, you have anapanasati. Yeah? These are 4 different ways of looking at this this theme of the mind moving towards samadhi. And then basically the factors are roughly the same, but with slight variations. So these are the 7 factors of awakening. So I don't really want to talk about them too much now, because we're going to talk about them later on. We'll be like preempting what we're supposed to do later. But so let's just leave them to one side for now. But this is meditation practice. This is really what it is. And then the Buddha says towards the very end that these bhikkhus are the 2 powers. Powers of the mind, yeah? Powerful things, things that lead towards awakening. It's almost like bringing the entire path down to 2 factors, reflection and developing the mind in meditation. So I'm going to stop there. We had lots of questions yesterday, so it's a little bit before the hour, which is a good thing. Let's have a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to the Q&A afterwards. So please come back maybe 7:05 or something like that. Okay, all right, let's start with the questions. Okay, that's really good. That's nice to see so many questions, because people are kind of getting into it and reflecting. Yeah, this is the kind of part of the power of reflection, is to ask questions, really. So I think it's a good sign there. So here we are. So question number 1. Let's assume, okay, that's a good start. That in this moment, all people become Buddhists. They stop craving for life partners, they reject the sensory realm. All procreation stops, and no new human beings are born. Would it mean that the ultimate goal of Buddhism is the end of humanity, or in other words, the collapse of the human realm which created Buddhism in the first place? Is that the ultimate aim of Buddhism? Well, the thing is that the ultimate aim of Buddhism is just to give everyone a chance to escape from suffering. That is the ultimate aim of Buddhism. You have the chance to escape from suffering by practicing this path, and anyone else who takes it up has a chance to escape from suffering as well. But there's no such thing as everyone taking up this path. It's impossible. Yeah, if that was the case, it would have happened already. Yeah. Buddhism has already happened from a Buddhist point of view. Buddhism re-arises, at regular intervals, or irregular intervals, whatever you want to call it. And of course, there is no such thing because the majority of people are not ready to hear these teachings. So it's not going to happen. Is it the ultimate goal? Would it be good if humanity, everyone became a Buddhist and everything? Would that be good? Sure, it would be good. Of course, it would be good. It would be great if everyone could end suffering. Would that be great? Why do we want people to suffer in the world? So, but that is not really the goal of Buddhism, because the Buddha realized it's possible. But so the goal is just for individual ending of suffering, not for all of humanity to stop. So, yeah. Okay. Some Buddhist teachers say that if we don't have the five senses, we won't suffer. For one who can't see well, if she could, she would share how she feels about it. Who can't see well? For one who can't see well, if she could share, how does she feel about it? Okay, I think we know what that is referring to. Where is she? At the back. Okay, at the very back. So, did you get the question? Somebody said that if we don't have the five senses, we won't suffer. So, is that true? Is not seeing a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think? What is your comment on that?
Well, meditating is not a problem. And but for normal things in life, I think myself, no one can see. Touch, get around. Okay. Not true.
So, okay. Thank you very much for running around and taking the mic around as we don't do that. Making a good camera, So, I think the answer, is that it depends on how you abandon the five senses. Yeah? Just going blind or seeing very badly in the human realm where we need the five senses to move around, obviously it's going to have a lot of some negative consequences, make life more difficult every now and again. In meditation, as Karl was saying, it doesn't matter, but in ordinary life it can make things awkward. But if it is a choice, and you meditate, and maybe you get reborn in a realm where you don't need to see, then of course it is a far superior experience not to be able to see. It is far better. It is far more pleasant. So it depends on the circumstances. But ideally, in the ideal way, yes, giving up seeing, giving up the five senses is a better experience than having them there. But of course, if you just make someone deaf and make someone blind in the human realm, that's not going to work, because that's not how you overcome these things. You overcome them by an inner path of purification, a deliberate abandoning. That's how you overcome these things, not by making people blind or whatever. Yeah. So will you still suffer if you haven't got the five senses? Well, so that is really the answer. It depends how you don't have them. Everything is nuanced in Buddhism. There's no such things are usually not one-sided. There's usually a nuanced answer to these things. Dear Ajahn, if we gain insight into the true nature of things, gain wisdom and eliminate ignorance, we could live a perfectly happy life. Why then not get reborn and enjoy a few more? Yay, enjoy. I don't get how not being born is better than a life without ignorance. It's a good question, right? And these questions are really important questions. And this gets to the core of what the Buddhism is about. And this is so hard to understand. The reason why this is so hard to understand is because we have a vested interest in existence. Yeah, you feel like, it feels like we are here. I'm here. I can feel it. I exist. I want to carry on. But the whole point is that very feeling is illusion. That is the whole point of Buddhism. And once you take away that vested interest that I exist, well, then this whole idea of being reborn seems like madness. Now it seems logical to you, but if you see non-self, it seems like madness. This is kind of the point, yeah? And this is why, this is kind of the nature of delusion. We're not able to see our own best interest. In fact, it isn't really your own best interest anymore, it's just getting rid of suffering. Yeah? So what you see is that the five khandhas, even if you have no ignorance, you see that the five khandhas are inherently suffering. They are inherently problematic. The will, wanting to do things, is actually painful. And this is why the states of samadhi, or deep bliss, are such beautiful states, precisely because you're giving up the will. So willing is painful. Yeah? Willing is negative. If you don't want to, what's the point of existing anyway? If you're not going to will anything, you should just sit there like a potato and kind of do nothing. You know, it kind of defeats the purpose in so many ways. So this is how. So it is profound. Yeah, the Buddhist teaching is very profound, and this is kind of this is why it's so hard to see delusion. It was blocks you from seeing these things. I'm going a bit faster than yesterday because there are so many questions and okay. If an adult commits a bad act, they will get bad karma. But if a kid or a minor age commit a bad act, like false speech or stealing or killing, will they also get bad karma? This is a good question, and again, and these are, I think the answer is that the amount of bad karma depends on how deliberate your action is, because it is about intention. Intention means that you are doing it deliberately. And the more deliberate it is, the more intention there is involved in that act. So, for example, if you are a bandit who likes to rob a bank, something like that, a lot of planning goes into robbing a bank, right? It's really, really hard work. As you see some of these schemes that some of these bank robbers have come up with, it takes years of planning in advance. So it's going to be very bad karma because an enormous amount of bad intention goes into that. Or if you're going to say someone to kill somebody, yeah? And if you want to kill somebody and then you want to do it in a way that no one discovers it, again, enormous amount of planning goes into it. Can you imagine having that idea of killing someone over a long period of time? It's incredibly, I mean, for some of us, it might kind of be a flash of a moment. We want to get rid of somebody because we're so fed up with them. But it is just a passing fancy. There's nothing serious behind that. But imagine planning someone's murder over a long period of time. Imagine. It's kind of really awful, isn't it? It's a terrible mindset to be in. You can imagine the amount of bad karma you make. So I would say that for a kid, very often they just lie kind of off the top of the head because their mum has found them out stealing a cookie from the jar in the kitchen or something like that. No, I didn't take it. And you know, it's a very small little thing, and it's not really going to have very bad consequences. Because of that. But still, it is probably a little bit of bad karma, because you are lying. The kid also feels bad about itself afterwards, at least to some extent. So, but you're right, there is a difference there. And as an adult, you are far more responsible for your actions, and the karma that you get will be far worse as a consequence. Dear Ajahn, you emphasize a lot on the comfort, letting go and effortless during meditation. But when, if I become too relaxed and fall asleep or feel drowsy, what then? Okay, yes, this is often a problem in meditation. You can fall asleep, but the answer really is it's okay to fall asleep. It's not such a big deal, It's a bit embarrassing, maybe. All the people around you snoring away and everyone else trying to meditate can be a bit sort of feel a bit self-conscious about it, maybe. But it is not necessarily bad, because often the reason why you want to fall asleep is because maybe you need a rest, yeah, especially early on during a retreat. And this is why when Vimala was saying, make sure you rest well during the first few days of the retreat. Make sure you get enough sleep. Don't try to live on this sleep-deprived diet that most people live on these days, with devices always on, kind of making them kind of, making you so busy with all these things that we have around us all the time. Right? So don't worry too much about that. If the mind is ready, then eventually you will come out of that tiredness, then you will be able to meditate. If the mind is not ready, then it just means that you're going to have to practice more of the right reflection, the right livelihood, and the right way of living, and doing all the right things so that you come back into your meditation state later on, and then your meditation will go well. But so there isn't really any. The answer is not to use effort to force yourself to be awake. Yeah? It seems like it's really straight, but you're really tired. You can feel the tension, because there's a tension between what you really want to do and what you're trying to do. And it usually doesn't get you anywhere. Usually makes you more tired because it feels negative, it feels unpleasant, and the mind just wants to rebel, it wants to get rid of everything, and it wants to just blot out reality. Yeah, this is the very main reason why people have drowsiness and tiredness in the meditation, is because you want to blot out suffering. Yeah? Suffering is a very strong cause for tiredness and drowsiness in meditation practice. Be wise about these things. If it feels bad, don't do it. If you can meditate and you feel kind of good about it, or reasonably alert, then carry on. If you want to have a tendency to be drowsy in meditation, do meditations and reflections that give rise to energy. Reflect a little bit on your good actions, on the fact that you have been living well for a long time. Wow, I've been living on the 5 precepts, I've been living with kindness or whatever for years. What a wonderful thing that is. Giving this gift of kindness to the world around me, because it is a gift to the world. People feel that you are kind, that people can relax around you, not be taken advantage of. All of these kind of things. It is a gift to everyone around you. You're giving that gift all the time. One of the suttas in Anguttara Nikaya, I think it's Anguttara 9, is number 20, something like that, Vimala Sutta, has a hierarchy of good karma. And it has all the various good karmas. You can give a gift to I think it starts off with an animal, it goes all the way to giving to the dual Sangha with the Buddha at its head, and then it goes beyond that as taking the triple refuge, is even more than any kind of gift. And then taking the 5 precepts, you consider high, more good karma than any kind of gift you give to anyone. Yeah? So it's a very powerful thing to do, and often we don't reflect on it enough, that we're actually doing something very powerful. We're making the world a better place for everyone by keeping precepts. There was an economist many years ago, he was a professor at Reading University in the UK, and he was actually on the board of the Bank of England, apparently, and he was a Buddhist, part of the English Sangha Trust. And he apparently said that if everyone kept the 5 precepts, it would the economic growth would be increased by 2 percentage points, something like that, because you wouldn't have all these transaction costs in the economy. So you're helping, I don't know if you're interested in helping the economy, but if you are, keep the 5 precepts. It's kind of cool, right? There's all these kind of hidden variables, hidden things going on under there. So anyway, so this is the way to reflect. Reflect on what you're doing, do something good. Reflect on the fact that you have these beautiful teachings as your teacher. How many people in the world get to hear this kind of teachings? They're so powerful, they're so wonderful, they're so life transforming. You have the Buddha, you have the world's greatest spiritual genius, the greatest master of meditation. I think this is the recorded human history as your teacher. It's kind of mind-blowing when you really understand what is going on. It really is mind-blowing. Both literally and metaphorically. Because this is kind of the way the Buddhist path is going. But mind-blowing in the kind of metaphorical sense as well. It's just extraordinary to have someone like the Buddha as your teacher. There is a a nice passage in the Vinaya Pitaka, which I have translated, where another Pitaka, he is visiting his brother-in-law in Rajagaon. Rajagaon is one of the great cities of ancient India, and the Pitaka lived in Savatthi, one of the other great cities of ancient India. So he visits his brother-in-law in Rajagaon. He's on some business. He's a very famous businessman, super duper wealthy, all of that. And then his brother-in-law says to the Pitaka, I have invited the Buddha for a meal tomorrow night. And the Pitaka goes, what? Did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. Everything is 3 times in the suttas. So it's like, and then he couldn't sleep all night, because he was so excited about the Buddha. So if you go to bed tonight and you can't sleep because you're so excited about hearing the suttas tomorrow, that's kind of the thing, you're in the presence of the Buddha. So it is extraordinary to have the Buddha as your teacher. This is the pinnacle of spiritual practice in the world. This is from the Buddhist point of view. All the religions might deny that, but to me, it is obviously the case. And so it is really extraordinary. And then when you really understand what is going on, that this is your teacher, it gives you goosebumps. Hair is standing on end, especially for those of you who have hair, but it's kind of, wow, this is really something special. This is the right way to think about this. I'm going to talk more about how to do these reflections later on. We come to the 6 recollections. Beautiful recollections about the qualities of the Buddha. If you start to understand the Buddha in the right way, it's just awesome to have the Buddha as a teacher. Okay, let's jump on. So that is some ideas of how to deal with tiredness. Okay. Oh, sorry, the wrong file. Okay, let's put this over here. So thank you for helping me organize things. Okay, during meditation, I notice that I always feel itchy somewhere. And I have the desire to scratch it, but as soon as I do that, somewhere else will begin to itch, and so on and so forth. What to do? I think this is the mind playing tricks on us. You would kind of itching here, itching there. I mean, it really depends. It depends on how itchy it is. If it really is itchy, better itch it. Otherwise, it's going to be very distracting. So a little bit of itching is okay. But also, there comes a point when you just, forget about the itch, let me stay with the breath. So you have to kind of feel it out. It's less like pain in the body. I don't recommend people to sit with too much pain. Much better to change your posture, go out, do a bit of walking meditation. Even if you have to lie down, that is okay. Change your posture a little bit. Don't sit with too much pain. Don't sit with too much itchiness. Same kind of thing. So if you need to scratch it, scratch it. But if it kind of dies down and becomes bearable, let it be. It's a balance again. So everything's about balance in Buddhism. Middle way, as I say, everything can be seen from the point of view of a kind of middle way. Yes, got it now. Okay, what are the 4 psychic powers that Buddha refers to, and why are they important? I don't really call them psychic, I prefer to call them 5 spiritual powers, the 4 aspects of spiritual power. These are the itipadas you probably are referring to. 4 steps, pada, literally means step or foot steps, the 4 bases of spiritual power. And it's really more about spiritual power. The word iti means power, and it often refers to like supernormal powers. But really, it also refers to spiritual power in general. Iti-pada. So what are they and what they are just ways of achieving samadhi. So samadhi can be based on different root causes that get you there. So there's chanda samadhi. Chanda is desire. That is, you use desire to achieve samadhi. It may sound contradictory, but at the beginning, we need some sort of desire to get us going. Then there is virya samadhi. There's the energy of the mind that takes you to samadhi. There's chitta samadhi. There's the mind itself that takes you to samadhi. There's Vimala samadhi, which is the investigation, at least, of samadhi. So these are sequential order. The most coarse one is when we use desire. When we start out practicing samadhi, you need to have some desire to get you going. You need to have some desire to watch the breath. You have to have some desire to sit down. You have to have some desire to get yourself on retreat. Yeah? All of these things are the desire, especially when you sit down and watch the breath, you need some desire to keep you going. And you're keen on samadhi. You know there's something beautiful going to happen there. So you're keen and you desire to watch the breath as a consequence. As that deepens, you get to the point where you have virya, you have energy of the mind. That energy of the mind makes the whole process so much easier because the energy is there. It's easy. You don't have to have desire anymore because there's no effort that needs to be sustained. You have the energy of the mind. And the energy itself brings you onto the meditation object. You stay with the meditation object. Samadhi arises from that energy. In fact, we will see this later on, but just have to look now at the 7 factors of awakening. The third one, or fourth one, what is it now? Or third one, I think it is, of those factors. Third one is energy. And those are the factors of awakening. So they can see a parallel between the iddhipadas and the factors of awakening, between the factors of awakening and the basis of spiritual power. Again, there's this kind of going together here. And then there is citta samadhi. Citta is mind itself. And citta is often used in the suttas almost as a synonym for samadhi itself. So this means that your mind is already getting very still. And you use that stillness to take it deeper. And then there's the final one, which is the most powerful of all of these spiritual powers, and that is the Vimala samadhi. Vimala is investigate. And if you have a very deep insight into the Dhamma, especially if you are a stream mentor or maybe even beyond that, all you have to do is to reflect on the nature of reality. And because you know it's all problematic, you can abandon everything back like that, go straight into samadhi. Kind of in the finger snap back, it happens because you just abandon everything straight away. This is the highest kind of level. These are the 4 ways of abandoning, of achieving samadhi according to the iddhipadas. And then it's conjoined with the sankhara and padana. Sankhara means this effort and will. You need some degree of effort and will to achieve that. At least you need to have the will to investigate reality, or the will to, to sustain the meditation or whatever. All right. So I hope that helps. These are very high kind of things, these iddhipadas, mostly to do with samadhi practice. But this is not about this kind of marvelous, amazing, super noble powers that you read about in the sutta. This is more about the kind of more ordinary stuff, like flying through the air and that kind of thing, which would be cool to see, but it's more like an entertainment than really spiritual practice. Nothing wrong with a bit of entertainment, of course, but all in its right time and place. So, what kinds of gods does the Buddha refer to in his last words to the mendicants? Okay, so this is what he talks about, the benefit for the gods and humans. And so what these gods are, these are like glorified human beings. This kind of these Buddhist gods. They're not gods in the Christian sense or in the Muslim sense or anything like that. They are just beings that share our samsaric existence of being born and dying. So if you make a lot of good karma, you can get reborn in a higher realm. That higher realm is called a god realm. Deva Loka in Pali. Deva is translated as gods. And the gods in the Buddhist text are very similar to the ancient gods of all countries have had in human history, right? The ancient Greek gods, for example, the ancient Roman gods, the ancient Indian god that existed before Buddhism, ancient god that you find in Chinese culture, you find everywhere, and the ancient Nordic gods. That's kind of where I came from, so I kind of know about the ancient Nordic gods. And so all culture had these kind of gods. And it's weird, but to me, these gods that existed in all these ancient cultures, to me, are far more real, far more realistic than the kind of unified God of Christianity or Islam. To me, that is much more a pie in the sky, much more a kind of empty cipher that means nothing. Whereas these kind of gods that we talk about in Buddhism, to me, make much more sense. They make more sense because they share so many qualities with us. They are born and they die. They have suffering like we have. Okay, their life is a bit longer, they have a bit more power, they're a bit more beautiful, the food is a bit nicer, they have ambrosia rather than having kind of fish and chips or whatever it is. So it's a bit more glorified. They're glorified human beings. But I find those, I don't know about you, I find those gods much more persuasive than the kind of one God that created the universe. To me, that God makes absolutely no sense at all. To me, I remember when I was a teen, I thought, what on earth is this creator God? And I kind of rejected it once and for all and never turned back again. It was completely silly to me, this kind of creator God. And one of the reasons for that, I say that, is because all of these ordinary gods, because they are temporary, they last for a short while, these are actually experienceable. We can experience these gods. We can see them getting born and real and passing away. These are actual things that we can share and we can understand directly through various powers. Whereas a creator God that has always existed and is permanent is something that by definition you can never experience. You cannot experience anything permanent. It's impossible because all we have is temporary glimpses of things. So if someone says that they have experienced the Christian God, well, actually they have had some kind of experience, but they have not experienced some kind of permanent entity that is always there behind the facade of kind of ordinary existence, because that is impossible. And to me, that became, when I thought like this, it became kind of obvious to me that the idea of this creator God, which is so common in all kind of cultures around the world, actually, it has to be a human creation because you cannot experience it. Whereas the Buddhist idea of gods, these are experienceable phenomena, these gods. This kind of makes much more sense. So to my mind, when I think about the idea of kind of multiple gods and things like that, I think it is quite possible that sometimes we tap into an underlying reality which is there, which we cannot see all the time, but sometimes we get a glimpse into the larger kind of the larger universe, which is out of normal contact for us, but sometimes we kind of have some kind of insight, some kind of ability to see deeper into reality. And then we see a ghost, or we see maybe a devaloka or something like that. And because everyone sometimes has the ability to tap into these things, it is perhaps to be expected that all the various human cultures should have a similar kind of outlook, especially in the ancient cultures of humanity. I don't know, I think that's only part of the answer. Maybe that is part of it. And sometimes we tap into that reality. So if you ever have a chance to see a ghost, you should say, yay, ghost, I can see ghost. Some people are afraid of ghosts. Actually, seeing ghosts is very lucky if you can see ghosts, because it means that you are seeing something more. You're getting an insight into the larger reality of things, which is very useful. So instead of being afraid of ghosts, we should welcome them. Welcome ghosts. Come closer and get a proper look at you and see what you like. Anyway, so that is what the Buddha means by gods. Okay, so this is a question from the internet. Am I correct in thinking that the view there is no self is not annihilationist because there is nothing there to be annihilated? That's exactly the Buddhist kind of point of view. When you say that there is no self, what it means is that there is annihilation becomes impossible, because annihilation is only possible if there's something to be annihilated, and that is the kind of idea of a self that gets annihilated. When there's a lack of self, all there is cessation. It's called cessation. It's no longer annihilation. What is it that ceases? Suffering. Is there a difference between speaking the truth versus honesty, and doing versus not being, doing versus being 100% honest, and lying versus not being 100% honest. Thank you. Is a difference between truth and versus honesty. Is there a difference between truth and honesty? Not sure. I guess honesty is when you are very particular about how you express things. Yeah, you are as close to the truth as possible. It's not just truth or falsehood. Often we kind of divide the world into wrong and right, true and false. But actually, it is much more of a grayscale kind of thing. Yeah, there's absolute truth. There's kind of a little bit less truth, a little bit less than that, and there's kind of outright dark lies on the other end of the scale. There's kind of all kind of things in between. Yeah, that's kind of the reality how this works. So I guess honesty is that we try to be as honest as we possibly can, as close to truth as we possibly can. And this is always about all of these precepts, is we want to maximize the adherence to these precepts and get as close as we can. You don't want to be lawyers and say, okay, when do I break this? How far can I get away with not telling the absolute truth, yeah, and still be okay, that kind of thing. That doesn't really work. Because then you are actually not creating the kind of karma you want to create. You want to be as honest as you possibly can, but not in the way of hurting other people. That's the other thing. Honesty is not the kind of way of getting your own back. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth. Anything like that, that's kind of not the point either. The point is kindness and using honesty in a kind way. And is there a difference between lying and not being 100% honest? Yes, there is a difference between that. And sometimes it is the wrong time to say things. Yeah, sometimes someone may be asking you a question, and you know that it is not the right time to answer that question. It feels wrong. And then you say, maybe later. Yeah, this is not the right time for me to talk about that. Please, let's talk about it some other time, or something like that. Yeah, you're not really not lying, but you're putting off the thing. So there are wise ways of speaking, so that you can kind of get out of a difficult situation, yeah? And there may even be occasions where lying is okay. Remember that the whole idea of Buddhist morality is that really it is based on motivation. What motivates you? Intention. Yeah, intention is what creates Dhamma. What gives intention its quality is the motivation that you have. So you intend to lie. Now, why do you want to lie? It's because you want to gain some benefit, and it's very bad karma. But are you lying perhaps out of compassion? Because someone needs to, sometimes compassion may actually be the motivation for lying in certain circumstances. And if it really is compassion, and if it really is you don't want to hide anything, if it's not selfish in any way, then lying actually can, theoretically, in the certain circumstances, be good karma. Yeah, because you are motivated by the right thing. But you have to be very careful there. I think it's very easy to deceive yourself. You have to think, yeah, just to out of compassion, okay, lying is all right. But don't be quick with those judgments, because it's very easy to be self-deceptive. Really make sure that if you want to lie, you have to really make sure that you're coming from a good place. Otherwise, it's going to be problematic. The things are not really black and white. So when we talk about the 5 precepts are approximations to morality and good conduct. They are very useful as approximations because they are very clear-cut. Yeah, so you have a very clear framework that guides you. But if you really want to go into the details of morality, it's far, far more complex than that. And this is the beauty of Buddhist morality, Buddhist ethics, because it allows for a very nuanced view of the world. Things like assisted dying, for example. Yeah, is that good or is it bad? Well, Buddhism actually allows for a good debate on those questions. Abortion, is it good or bad? Again, there's a very nuanced debate behind in Buddhism about that. All of these difficult kind of things, that we talk about. So actually, Buddhism has good answers to these things. And so that is kind of what makes it interesting. So Buddhism, things are not black and white. Things are grayscale, various shades of gray. And our job is to make it as bright, make that shade of gray as light as possible. Yeah? The lighter the shade of gray, the better the karma. Having purely white karma is very, very hard. The only time you have karma that is absolutely bright and pure is after you come out of a samadhi state. Otherwise, there's always going to be some defilement kind of lurking in the mind somewhere. All right. Please talk a little bit about reincarnation in the Theravada tradition. All right. So, the kind of favorite word usually in the Buddhism is rebirth rather than reincarnation. But they are roughly the same word. Sometimes people don't like the word reincarnation. From the Latin word carne, which is kind of flesh, right? Or meat. And means like going back into the flesh. That's basically what reincarnation means. And it kind of has the underlying sense of a soul transmigrating from one body to another one. That's why reincarnation is not so kind of favored in Buddhist circles, but it basically depends how you use the word. So we did talk about that quite a bit this morning, about how it works, moving from one life to the next one, how craving is the thing that projects you into a future life. When there's no craving, that projection stops. How it is the level of your consciousness, depending on how you live, that decides where you get reborn. And then there's all these possibilities of rebirth. Reborn as a human being, which is probably the most likely rebirth if you live a decent life. But then if you live a bad life, you can be reborn in states of suffering. Reborn as an animal, I don't really recommend it. You can also get reborn in states that are very pleasant. But all of these states are part of the cycle of existence. And as long as you're part of the cycle of existence, there's a guarantee that eventually you're going to be reborn in a bad place. This is part of the problem of suffering in Buddhism. And that eventually down the track, you're going to do the wrong thing, hang out with the wrong people, get a bad influence on you. And then because we are conditioned, because we are brainwashed, no longer brainwashed by Buddhism, but you're brainwashed by the mafia or whatever, then you're going to do bad things as a consequence. So this is why the whole idea of reincarnation in the end is a bad idea, because it eventually leads to all kinds of suffering. Okay, how do I stop obsessing about the past and imagining how I will deal with the situations in the future? Yes, this is one of those critical things. In meditation practice, there's a beautiful sutta called the paṭicca-samuppāda sutta, Majjhima Nikāya 131. What is it? One Buddha, like one good night, something like that. Is what it means. And that sutta has this beautiful verse where it says that you let go of the past, you don't think about the future, and you stay in the present. That is where you kind of have a clear vision about things coming, arising, and passing away, kind of stuff. It's very beautiful, simple sutta about the idea of giving up the past and the future. There's 4 suttas in a row that all have that paṭicca-samuppāda theme, one good night theme. Single, is that single? Okay, single extra night. Okay, let's call it single extra night. Eka is 1, so yeah. Single excellent. Excellent is better than good, isn't it? So how do we do this? And the way to do it, first of all, you have to know what exactly are you obsessing about the past. And very often the things that you obsess about is guilt feelings. Yeah, you feel guilty about something. You feel like you have maybe treated someone bad, or someone else has treated you bad, or whatever. It's things that happen between people. So one of the best ways of stopping that kind of obsession is to learn to forgive. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Forgiveness, how to kind of wipe the slate blank, as they say. Yeah, so you can kind of forget about the past. Forgiveness is very powerful. But to be able to forgive, you have to think about the world in the right way. It's very easy to say you have to forgive, but then you can't do it. You need to think in the right way for forgiveness to happen. And think in the wrong way, forgiveness is not going to happen. So this is one of the main things about the past. There's also the possibility you might think about the past. Oh, in the past things were so wonderful and nice. I had this wonderful relationship and I was wealthy before I placed all that money on the stock market, lost everything, and now I'm kind of have to sleep under a tree or whatever, a bench in the park or whatever. Yeah. This is also a kind of thinking about the past, where we think the past is superior to the present. And the way to overcome that is just to understand that, well, if you're practicing a spiritual practice, you're actually creating a good future for yourself. In the past, whatever you had then, you were actually more deluded than you are now, because now you're practicing the spiritual way. Now you're creating the future. Now you have a good future, a bright future. So actually that past is irrelevant. Just let it go. It's kind of, who cares about that past? So let it go. The future, how you deal with the future is just to understand again that there is no real future in this world. This world is not interesting. This world doesn't go anywhere. This world is just going around and around with the same problems. And there's nothing there of interest in this world. This is the delusion to think that there's something, we're actually going somewhere that's interesting. No, we're not going anywhere that's interesting at all. It's more of the same. Where we go that is interesting is within. That is what is interesting. That is where we escape from all the problems of the world. So you need to kind of get that clear. If you want to create a good future, you don't create it by thinking about it. You create it by going into the present and doing the right thing now. That is how you create a good future, both in this life and in future lives. But it's hard to see that. And this is why you're thinking about the future. This is why the power of reflection is so useful, because the power of reflection is what will help you to see that that future in the sensory world isn't all that interesting. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that. Not tomorrow, but probably the day after. I haven't really got a schedule, but I know that the suttas are coming in which sequence. I know roughly when it's going to happen. So not tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday, is that right? So Tuesday then, something like that. So this is really how you think about these things. And then when you lose interest in that future, you lose interest in that past, you're not going to think about it anymore. You think about it because you think it's interesting. When the penny finally drops, it's not interesting. Okay, that's it. You can stay in the present. You can enjoy the present. The other thing that you have to do is that you have to learn to enjoy the present. This is one of the reasons why we place so much emphasis in the spiritual practice about experiencing a bit of joy, a bit of gladness in meditation. Minimize the suffering. If you suffer a lot when you sit, then you're not going to be able to be mindful, because the mind is going to rebel against being here. You should make the present moment the pleasant moment. It's one of Ajahn Brahm's catchphrases. And it's a very nice catchphrase. Make the present moment the pleasant moment. Then you will be able to stay here in the present. Then you will be able to do meditation practice. This is one of the very important reasons we should not sit with too much pain and too much dukkha and suffering of various kinds, because the mind is not going to want to be here. It will be off fantasizing about all kinds of stuff. All right. So many questions. Okay, we're getting there. So looking to the future again. It's terrible, isn't it? I just told everyone not to look to the future, and I said, I'm getting there. You should tell me off. Please remind me, because everyone goes astray now and again. Anyway, okay. If craving leads directly to sufferings, people would do that often, would they? But if cravings are satisfied when we are happy, although the consequences often lead to suffering. Do you agree? Yes, it is true. Craving often does lead to a kind of happiness. Yeah, you crave because you are dissatisfied. The craving arises, and then kind of you do something to kind of satisfy that craving, and it kind of gives you a kind of temporary satisfaction. It's a bit like smoking. Yeah, when you smoke, you crave incredibly powerful craving. Say those people who have smoked, I've never smoked regularly, I don't really know, but they say the craving is extremely strong. Yeah? And then, of course, when you have the cigarette, it feels really nice, but actually, cigarettes taste terrible. Yeah, I smoked a few cigarettes in my life, but to me, it was absolutely horrible. But you have to be cool when you're young to still kind of smoke some cigarettes and a cigar and that kind of stuff. And that's what I did. Spend my university days doing, you know, well, at least sometimes, not all the time, of course. But it's a bit like that. You smoke a cigarette, it feels great because the craving is so strong. That's a little bit what craving is like. And that is why craving is nice, because when you overcome it, it feels better afterwards. So this is one of those great insights in the path, is to understand how painful craving actually is, because it leads to a mind that is very agitated, very restless, very, very, very uncomfortable, actually. But we mistake it for happiness because we think it will lead to some kind of positive thing down the track. Yeah? This is really the problem. So it's about seeing it clearly. The deeper your meditation is, the deeper your samadhi is, the more you will understand that craving actually is a very profound kind of suffering, very deep kind of suffering. And you will be surprised that one of the similes that I will be looking at in a couple of days' time that talks about craving and sense desire, how problematic it is. You will be surprised at how powerful and strong that simile is. You may have heard it before because I teach the similes all the time. I really enjoy them, actually. I'm not sure if I'm a masochist or whatever, but I think the similes are really great because they really get to the point of the problems of sensory existence. So, the craving of the second noble truth is really the craving that leads to rebirth. That is why it is called suffering in the second noble truth. So it's kind of important to think of that. When we talk about craving leading to suffering, that is actually what it means in the Buddhist teachings. So people often think that craving leading to suffering is something in the present, right here and now. Craving leads to suffering, but actually right here and now, craving is suffering. It doesn't lead to suffering. Big distinction there. Craving leading to suffering really is about future lives. Think about that, because this is often a misunderstanding as well in Buddhism. Okay is the favorite saying of the Dhamma. Okay. All right, so what's without self exactly what is reborn? Which of the phenomena that make up this being me, this concept of rebirth, eludes me? Yes, it eludes a lot of people, and it's kind of hard. Give it your time and you get your mind around it. So what it is that gets reborn? What gets reborn is the stream of consciousness. Vimala sutta is called in the suttas. Vimala sutta is established in this life and in the future life, according to the sutta-retreat sutta, I think it is, which is Diga Nikaya number 28 or 29, one of those, sutta-retreat sutta. So the idea here is that consciousness is not a thing, it is a stream. So if you imagine, and this is kind of the metaphor I usually use to explain this, is a simile of a river. So if you have a river in front of you, you know that no two moments of watching that river is the same. The molecules are different one moment after the next one because they're moving on fairly swiftly because it's a river. But the overall shape of the river is basically the same. The overall shape of the river changes very gradually and slowly depending on the season, whether it's dry or wet, whether the snow is melting on the mountaintops or whatever. And it swells up or it goes down again, depending on the seasons. And the self is a bit like that. The sense of me changes, but it changes slowly, depending on cause and conditions. But if you look gradually at the mind, it changes very, very fast. I'm not going to say that one moment is different from the next moment, because that's bringing abhidhamma into things. But it changes very rapidly. Not momentary, because I don't really want to bring abhidhamma into things, but it changes very fast. It arises and stays for a while, disappears again. Something else arises, stays, and disappears again. But the overall shape of the mind, overall feeling of what it's like to be you, changes slowly. Yeah. Get into depression. The depression stays for a while, doesn't disappear straight away. Then you become happy again. The happiness becomes very much stronger, it lasts for a while, and then that disappears. It becomes even more happy. Yeah? That's kind of the Buddhist path here. So this is the way of thinking about the idea of non-self. There is a mind that is there. There's a mind that is reborn. The mind is a stream of consciousness. It's not a thing as such. Oh, okay, one last question I've already got in my hands. I guess I've got to reply to this one. Actually, we're doing very well, so it's getting there. Maybe what we can do tomorrow, Anne-Marie, is if we can put these aside, they can do this first tomorrow, and then I can do this, so otherwise we can kind of get that would be marvelous. Thank you. Dear Ajahn, if one sees that life is full of dukkha is suffering, and have no more desire for rebirth, does this intention count on the path to liberation? Yes, that is helpful. Yeah? If you really feel that life is suffering, you have a good motivation to get out of it, right? There's an interesting sutta where the Buddha says, sometimes people have this desire to end life, committing suicide. This is really what Vimala tanha is about, the three kinds of tanha in the second order. Vimala means the tanha, the craving from existence. Take that too far, you commit suicide. Unfortunately, and this is kind of the problem from Buddhist point of view, you get reborn, because it is based on craving. It's kind of terrible, isn't it? You try to make an end of it all, and you get reborn, you have to carry on. And this is why suicide is not really a solution in Buddhism. Except if it is a physical pain, it's a bit different. Then, maybe at the very end of the life, then, having some kind of assisted dying may be acceptable, but not suicide because you are depressed or sad or there's too much suffering in general. That doesn't really work. So yes, it can be a good thing if you use it in the right way to motivate you to practice, not allow yourself to get depressed or down or sad about it. Then it can be a positive thing. There is a very interesting sutta where the Buddha says that he praises the annihilationist view. He says of all the views of the outsiders are the people outside of Buddhism. This is the closest to the word of the Buddha, the Buddhist view of things, annihilation. Not eternalist view, that is kind of completely wrong. But those people already have an annihilationist idea. They're already leaning in the right direction, because the purpose of Buddhism is actually to end things, to make things cease, not to annihilate things, but to make things cease. What are we making cease? Suffering. So in that sense, it is already. So I found a very interesting little passage found in the Anguttara Nikaya, so I can't remember the exact sutta at the moment. Or is having jhana a must? Both are a must, Both the intention that comes from having the desire to end dukkha and achieving jhana states, samadhi. Both are useful. The intention to gain liberation is the impetus that gives rise to jhana and the track if you use it in the right way. How useful is the intention? It can be very useful, but again, use it in the right way. Everything in Buddhism is a kind of used in the right way. Everything can be misused. So be wise about how you use these things. Would it be possible to give a metta chant to all the fallen soldiers in this area during the last war? Thank you for all your teachings. I think that's a very nice idea. To realize you kind of think of all the soldiers. Are you going to do that? I'll give this one to you to remind you of that one. Maybe I will. Let's see what happens there. Okay, good. So it's already 8:05. So we have come. Yes.
Can I chant the paṭicca-samuppāda?
No.
No, in the morning.
In the morning.
Yeah, so you can tell
You can.
what's the Pali.
Are you going to chant paṭicca-samuppāda in Pali in the morning? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can tell them what the Pali is.
I can tell them what the Pali is.
No, the word.
Yeah.
You know, avijja.
Yeah, but you have to. They're only going to be able to chant this if they're going to have a sheet or something. You have to write it out for them.
I will chant.
Yeah.
But just for them to know, when I chant, that it's the.
Yeah.
If you can tell them in Pali what avijja, paṭicca, sankhara.
What it means.
Yeah.
This is the whole course. That's what I do all the time.
Just tell them the Pali.
Yeah, I think tomorrow when you do the chanting with them, you will have to do the chanting anyway. It's very difficult to chant Pali if you're not used to it, So you chant and other people follow along to the best of their ability.
Chant, but just for them to, understand.
Yeah, you want to do it because you're going to do this. You better do it because then you have your pronunciation. So especially if you do it better, because it's your thing. Here you go. It's your baby, so you do
It's her handwriting. Well, you can tell
It's much better if you do it because you are the chanter in the mornings. They're going to have to listen to your voice. They're going to have to follow you. So if you explain, then it's kind of makes more sense to them. So,
well, the basic like avijja, paccaya, sankhara, paccaya, viññāna, paccaya, nāma-rūpa, paccaya, salayatana, paccaya, patsa, paccaya, vedana, paccaya, tanha, paccaya, upadana, paccaya, bhava, paccaya, jati, paccaya, jara, marana, soka, pariteva, dukkha, domanastupaya, sampon.
Sadhu.
That's forward.
Forward. You're going to reverse as well? Cessation mark. Okay. Yeah.
Avijja yat preva asesa vinaka niroda sankhara niroda what viññāna niroda nāma-rūpa niroda salayatana nirodo sayalatana niroda patsa niroda vedana niroda tanha niroda upadana niroda bhava niroda jati niroda jara marana soka pariteva dukkha domanastupaya nirucchanti. That's the reverse order. Yeah, eva me prastasa kevalasta dukkha khandasa nirodo. In Sri Lanka, they chant every morning.
Every morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
This one.
Okay.
But I haven't,
It's nice to have a Pali behind the scenes. Yeah.
I haven't been to chanting in Sri
Yeah. Okay. Shall we do the Arahang Samma Sambuddha? Arahang Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivade Bhagavato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namassami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.